All praises to Ahaya Bahashem Yeshaya, Warawak Kadash. That's all praises to the Father, in the name of the Son and the Holy Spirit. This is Sabal Nabaya. Family, today is what the world calls Thanksgiving. And when I say the world, I mean America. I'm not going to get into today exactly what Thanksgiving is. I mean, I will touch on it a little bit, but it would actually be a takeaway from what I need to share with you today. It is important for people to understand what they are dealing with. Now, let me just say this. If you are listening to me with your children, this is not a lesson that small children should listen to. This is grown folk talk. There will be much edification, and then you can go back and break this down to your children in a way that they can receive it on their level. And that's good practice for you, because really, we need to be all things to all men. And that means that we need to be able to get on the level with people so that we can reach them where they are. We don't want to run anyone off with the truth. So as always, we're going to start in Isaiah chapter 28, and we're going to read verses 9 and 10. Whom shall he teach knowledge, and whom shall he make to understand doctrine? Them that are weaned from the milk and drawn from the breast. For precept must be upon precept, precept upon precept, line upon line, line upon line, here a little and there a little. So guys, we know that we have to get it here and there, and this verse is no exception. So go to Psalms 119, 104. That's Psalms 119, 104. Through thy precepts I get understanding, therefore I hate every false way. So we understand that getting our understanding this way will actually show us the true path. Every other way is false. Now drop down to verse 128. Therefore I esteem all thy precepts concerning all things to be right, and I hate every false way. You see that? This is the right way. Okay, family. So, we know that in regards to Thanksgiving, that there is a dark and bloody history associated with it. But we also know that so many of our people, they come together, they celebrate the day, and they tell us that it's all about being thankful. So they make a choice to ignore what they deem as negative, even though it is the truth. They'll ignore the truth and then say, we're just gathering together to show that we're thankful to God for everything that He's given us. But go with me to the book of Acts, chapter 5, verse 9. That's Acts, chapter 5, verse 9. Y'all don't laugh at me. My wife makes fun of me in the way that I speak sometimes because I say Acts, and it sounds like axe, like I'm chopping down a tree. I don't know. Maybe that's just because I'm from the South. Anyway, Acts, chapter 5, verse 9. Then Peter said unto her, How is it that ye have agreed together to tempt the Spirit of the Most High? Behold, the feet of them which have buried thy husband are at the door, and shall carry thee out. So, when it comes to Thanksgiving, people gather together with the very people who came and wrought genocide upon the northern kingdom. But Peter was not ignorant to these type of things, because he told this woman, "How is it that you can agree to tempt the Most High? The feet of them which buried thy husband, your husband's killers, are at the door, and you sit in agreement with them because you say it's all about love and thankfulness, and we can be positive and put the past behind us and blah, 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 blah." People don't really have an understanding of what our ancestors went through. We grow up watching all of these TV shows and movies. I remember watching movies like RoboCop when I was 5 years old. No, I think I was 4 years old. And hey, when I think about movies like that, I remember really enjoying that when I was young and growing up with RoboCop being one of my heroes. Murphy. Now, 7 or 8 years ago, as an adult, I got to rewatch RoboCop. And I was shocked at how violent it was and how much profanity was all throughout the movie. Way more profanity than you hear in today's media. But they have conditioned us to be insensitive to death, to destruction, to torture, to extreme torment, because we've seen RoboCop and Rambo and Terminator, and every other show on television has someone getting killed and shot. So the gravity of death is diminished when we speak of past events, because it's common knowledge what the U.S. Cavalry did to the North American natives. But people speak of it so matter-of-factly. If we are to repent for the sins of our forefathers, then we should study our forefathers, learn who they are, learn what they went through, so we don't repeat their same mistakes. Because what was in them is in us. And if we aren't led by the Spirit, then we're led by the flesh. The flesh will lead you into sin, and all sin leads to death. So let's cut through the veil of lies, the fantasy that most people have created to reinforce their insensitivity to bloodshed. Let's go to Hebrews chapter 11, and we're going to read verses 32 through 40. That's Hebrews chapter 11, and we're going to read verses 32 through 40. And what shall I more say? For the time would fail me to tell of Gideon and Barak, and of Samson, and of Jephthah, of David also, and Samuel, and of the prophets, who through faith subdued kingdoms, wrought righteousness, obtained promises, stopped the mouths of lions, quenched the violence of fire, escaped the edge of the sword, out of weakness were made strong, waxed valiant in fight, turned to fight the armies of the aliens. Women received their dead raised to life again, and others were tortured, not accepting deliverance, that they might obtain a better resurrection. And others had a trial of cruel mockings and scourgings, yea, moreover, of bonds and imprisonment. They were stoned, they were sawn asunder, were tempted, were slain with the sword. They wandered about in sheepskins and goatskins, being destitute, afflicted, tormented, of whom the world was not worthy. They wandered in deserts and in mountains and in dens and caves of the earth. And these all, having obtained a good report through faith, received not the promise. Ahiah having provided some better thing for us, that they without us should not be made perfect. So right here we're looking at how those who suffered persecution and torments but kept their faith, they are spoken very highly of in Scripture. They are to be to us an example. Now you may be wondering, what does the suffering of these people, what does the suffering of these saints have to do with Thanksgiving? Let's go in our Apocryphas to 2 Maccabees chapter 6, and let's read verse 7. That's 2 Maccabees chapter 6, verse 7. And in the day of the king's birth every month, they were brought by bitter constraint to eat of the sacrifices. And when the fast of Bacchus was kept, the Jews were compelled to go in a procession to Bacchus, carrying ivy. Okay, so not going to go very deep into Bacchus on this lesson. However, I am putting together a lesson that deals with Bacchus. Bacchus was the Roman god of wine, revelry, drunkenness, sexual perversion, also called Dionysus. The festivals of Bacchus are actually also reimagined as Christmas, but like I said, that's a different video. What I want to bring out in this verse is that it tells you that on the king's birthday, he made them to eat the sacrifices to Bacchus. Now we know that we don't eat things that are sacrificed to idols. Now if you chose not to eat these things, if you said, nope, I want to follow the Most High, it says in the law of Moses not to eat these things, I'm not going to eat it, then you were put to death. Let's go to 2 Maccabees chapter 7, and we're going to read verses 1 through 6. That's 2 Maccabees chapter 7, and we're going to read verses 1 through 6. It came to pass also that 7 brethren with their mother were taken and compelled by the king against the law to taste swine's flesh, and were tormented with scourges and whips. But one of them that spake first said thus, What wouldest thou ask or learn of us? We are ready to die, rather than to transgress the laws of our fathers. Then the king, being in a rage, commanded pans and cauldrons to be made hot, by which forthwith, being heated, he commanded to cut out the tongue of him that spake first, and to cut off the utmost parts of his body, the rest of his brethren and his mother looking on. Now when he was thus maimed in all his members, he commanded him, being yet alive, to be brought before the fire, and to be fried in the pan. And as the vapor of the pan was for a good space dispersed, they exhorted one another with the mother to die manfully, saying thus, The Most High Power looketh upon us, and in truth hath comfort in us, as Moses in his song, which witnessed to their faces, declared, saying, And he shall be comforted in his servants. So on one of these feast days, this mother and her 7 sons refused to eat this swine's flesh. So the king took the first brother, tortured him, and killed him in front of the mother and the other brethren. Verse 6 says, "The Most High Power looketh upon us, and in truth have comfort in us, as Moses in his song, which witnessed to their faces, declared, saying, and he shall be comforted in his servants." Let's go to Deuteronomy chapter 32 and read verses 35 through 38. That's Deuteronomy chapter 32 and read verses 35 through 38. "To me belongeth vengeance and recompense. Their foot shall slide in due time. For the day of their calamity is at hand, and the things that shall come upon them make haste. For the Most High shall judge his people, and repent himself for his servants, when he seeth that their power is gone, and there is none shut up or left. And he shall say, Where are their gods, their rock in whom they trusted, which did eat the fat of their sacrifices, and drank the wine of their drinks and offerings? Let them rise up and help you, and be your protection." So our mother and 7 sons in 2nd Maccabees, they knew these verses. They knew that it is better to die at the hands of a tyrant than to take part in these sacrifices. Because the Most High says, you want to eat things sacrificed to devils? Go ahead, but let them save you. Let them be your protection. If you actually keep reading in verse 39, it says, "See now that I, even I, am he, and there is no power with me. I kill, and I make alive. I wound, and I heal. Neither is there any that can deliver out of my hand." So the Most High says your idols can't save you, that you sacrifice to. Let's go back to 2nd Maccabees chapter 7, and we're going to read verse 7. That's 2nd Maccabees chapter 7, and we're going to read verse 7. "So when the first was dead after this manner, they brought the second to make him a mocking stock. And when they had pulled off the skin of his head with the hair, they asked him, Wilt thou eat before thou be punished throughout every member of thy body?" So they killed the first son, and then they brought out the second to torture him, and then they scalped him. So this king wanted to make him a mocking stock. See, there was no reasoning with this king. And you cannot allow someone like this king, a fool, you cannot allow a fool to corrupt you. Let's go to Ecclesiasticus or Sirach, chapter 22, and read verse 13 through 15. That's Ecclesiasticus or Sirach, chapter 22, and we're going to read verses 13 through 15. "Talk not much with the fool, and go not to him that hath no understanding. Beware of him, lest thou have trouble, and thou shalt never be defiled with his fooleries. Depart from him, and thou shalt find rest, and never be disquieted with madness. What is heavier than lead, and what is the name thereof but a fool? Sand and salt and a mass of iron is easier to bear than a man without understanding." So this king was a fool, not somebody to deal with. My grandfather would say he's a fool 5 ways. Call him star-nated. A star-nated fool. I say, what's that mean? Well, star got 5 points on it, and that's a fool 5 ways. So the king could not understand why these people would rather die than transgress the laws of the Most High. he couldn't see the wisdom in obedience to the Most High. I don't know if you guys have ever read Susanna in the Apocrypha, but when you read that text, it tells you that Susanna was in the garden working, and two old pervy men who were stalking her wanted to lay with her, and they tried to blackmail her into sleeping with them, said that they would tell everybody about her adulterous ways if she did not give in to them. As a matter of fact, let's just see what Susanna had to say to these men. Go in your Apocryphas to Susanna, chapter 1. There's only one chapter anyway, but we're going to go to Susanna chapter 1, and we're going to read verses 22 and 23. That's Susanna chapter 1, verse 22 and 23. Then Susanna sighed and said, I am straitened on every side, for if I do this thing, it is death unto me. And if I do it not, I cannot escape your hands. It is better for me to fall into your hands and not do it than to sin in the sight of the Most High. So we see there that Susanna had the wisdom to know not to sin against the Most High, even though the circumstance at the time might have seemed that sin was the answer. How many of y'all know that sin is never the answer? Let's go to Wisdom of Solomon, chapter 12, and let's read verses 23 through 27. That's Wisdom of Solomon 12, verses 23 through 27. Wherefore, whereas men have lived dissolutely and unrighteously, thou hast tormented them with their own abominations. For they went astray very far in the ways of error, and held them for gods, which even among the beasts of their enemies were despised, being deceived as children of no understanding. Therefore unto them, as to children without the use of reason, thou didst send a judgment to mock them. But they that would not be reformed by that correction wherein he dallied with them shall feel a judgment worthy of a higher. For look, for what things they grudged when they were punished, that is, for them whom they thought to be gods, now being punished in them when they saw it, they acknowledged him to be the true power, whom before they denied to know, and therefore came extreme damnation upon them. So you see, sin is never the answer. That's just a deception. That's no understanding. That's why we have to be reformed by correction, or else suffer extreme damnation. Let's go back to 2 Maccabees chapter 7, and we're going to read verses 8 and 9. That's 2 Maccabees chapter 7, and we're going to read verses 8 and 9. But he answered in his own language and said, No. Wherefore he also received the next torment in order, as the former did. And when he was at the last gasp, he said, Thou like a fury takest us out of this present life, but the King of the world shall raise us up, who have died for his laws, unto everlasting life. So this brother knew that if he died keeping the law, that he would be raised up in everlasting life, raised up in glory. He knew to make that proclamation. How many of you know that you can recite the words of the Most High to the Most High? Esther knew this. Let's go to the rest of Esther, sometimes called additions to Esther, in your Apocrypha. It's going to be Esther chapter 14, verse 12. That's Esther chapter 14, verse 12. Remember, O Most High, make thyself known in time of our affliction, and give me boldness, O King of the nations, and Most High of all power. See, she knew what the Most High said. All she had to do was remind the Most High that he said it. When you speak like that with faith, you will see results. Now let's go back to 2 Maccabees chapter 7, and let's read verses 10 through 14. That's 2 Maccabees chapter 7, verses 10 through 14. After him was the third made a mocking stock, and when he was required, he put out his tongue, and that right soon, holding forth his hands manfully, and said courageously, These I had from heaven, and for his laws I despised them, and from them I hope to receive them again. Insomuch that the king and they that were with him marveled at the young man's courage, for that he nothing regarded the pains. Now when this man was dead, also they tormented and mangled the fourth in like manner. And when he was ready to die, he said thus, It is good being put to death by men, to look for hope from Ahiah, to be raised up from him, Salakia, to be raised up again by him. As for thee, thou shalt have no resurrection to life. So again, we're seeing these men be put to death, one after the other. They were not the first to be put to death this way, and they will not be the last to be put to death this way. How many of y'all know that in the future, some of us may have to man up and die manfully like these brothers did? Have to put our heads on the guillotine with great courage and faith, knowing that we will be raised up in glory. Go to Sirach, or Ecclesiasticus chapter 11. That's Sirach, or Ecclesiasticus chapter 11. And we're going to read verses 5 through 9. That's Sirach, or Ecclesiasticus chapters 5 through 9. Many kings have sat down upon the ground, and one that was never thought of hath worn the crown. Many mighty men have been greatly disgraced, and honorable delivered into other men's hands. Blame not before thou hast examined the truth. Understand first, and then rebuke. Answer not before thou hast heard the cause, neither interrupt men in the midst of their talk. Strive not in a matter that concerneth thee not, and sit not in the judgment of sinners. So, ladies and gentlemen, in a situation like this, where you've got a king, someone in power, torturing people like this, who are standing for the Most High, the question I pose to you is, who is the real king? Because for one of these men, hell and damnation awaits him. But the other, will be raised up in glory. Let's go back to 2 Maccabees chapter 7, and we're going to read verses 15 through 28. That's 2 Maccabees chapter 7, and we're going to read verses 15 through 28. Afterward, they brought the fifth also and mangled him. Then looked up unto the king and said, Thou hast power over men, thou art corruptible, thou doest what thou wilt, yet think not that our nation is forsaken of Ahiah. But abide a while, and behold his great power, how he will torment thee and thy seed. After him also they brought the sixth, who being ready to die said, Be not deceived without cause, for we suffer these things for ourselves, having sinned against our power. Therefore marvelous things are done unto us. But think not that thou takest a hand to strive against the Most High. that thou shalt escape unpunished. But the mother was marvelous above all, and worthy of honorable memory. For when she saw her 7 sons slain within the space of one day, she buried with good courage, because of the hope that she had in the Most High. Yea, she exhorted every one of them in her own language, filled with courageous spirits, and stirring up her womanish thoughts with a manly stomach. She said unto them, I cannot tell how ye came into my womb, for I neither gave you breath nor life, neither was it I that formed the members of every one of you, but doubtless the Creator of the world, whom formed the generation of man, and found out the beginning of all things, will also of his own mercy give you breath and life again, as ye now regard not your own selves for his law's sake. Now Antiochus, guys, that's the king we're talking about. Antiochus, Epiphanes. Verse 24. Now Antiochus, thinking himself despised, and suspecting it to be a reproachful speech, whilst the youngest was yet alive, did not only exhort him by words, but also assured him with oaths that he would make him both a rich and happy man, if he would turn from the laws of his fathers, and that also he would take him for his friend, and trust him with affairs. But when the young man would in no case hearken unto him, the king called his mother, and exhorted her that she would counsel the young man to save his life. And when he had exhorted her with many words, she promised him that she would counsel her son. But she, bowing herself toward him, laughing the cruel tyrant to scorn, spake in her country language on this manner, O my son, have pity upon me, that bare thee 9 months in my womb, and gave thee suck 3 years, and nourished thee, and brought thee up into this age, and endured the troubles of education. I beseech thee, my son, look upon the heaven and the earth, and all that is therein, and consider that Ahijah made them of things that were not, and so was mankind made likewise. Do y'all hear the wisdom coming out of this woman's mouth? Go to Psalms chapter 86 and read verse 10. That's Psalms chapter 86 verse 10. For thou art great and doest wondrous things. Thou art God alone. Let me rephrase that for you. Thou art power alone. There is no power but the power of the Most High. He is power. The wisdom of this woman cultivated these children in her womb, but takes none of the credit. That is wisdom. Go to Hebrews chapter 11. Let's read verse 3. That's Hebrews chapter 11, verse 3. Through faith we understand that the worlds were framed by the word of God, so that things which are seen were not made of things which do appear. This woman did not even have this verse to reference, but she had the understanding. Now let's go back to 2 Maccabees chapter 7, and let's read verses 29 through 33. That's 2 Maccabees chapter 7, verses 29 through 33. Fear not this tormentor, but being worthy of thy brethren, take thy death, that I may receive thee again in mercy with thy brethren. I can't even read this story without tearing up. My goodness. Salakia. Let's keep reading. While she was yet speaking these words, the young man said, Whom wait ye for? I will not obey the king's commandment, but I will obey the commandment of the law that was given unto our fathers by Moses. And thou that hast been the author of all mischief against the Hebrews shalt not escape the hands of Ahijah. for we suffer because of our sins. And though the living power be angry with us a little while for our chastening and correction, yet shall he be at one again with his servants. Wow. So first the wisdom of the mother, then the wisdom of this youngest son. Let me show you what the youngest son understood. Go back to the rest of Esther in the Apocrypha, and let's read Esther chapter 16, verses 15 and 16. That's Esther chapter 16, verses 15 and 16. But we find that the Jews, whom this wicked wretch hath delivered to utter destruction, are no evildoers, but live by the most just laws, and that they be children of the Most High and most mighty living power, who have ordered the kingdom both unto us and to our progenitors in the most excellent manner. The youngest son understood that the Most High's order is perfect, and although he might have to suffer for a while here, he knew what awaited him. All praises to Ahia for the faith of these brothers, of this mother, of this family. Let's go back to 2 Maccabees chapter 7, and let's read verses. Let's reread 33, and we'll go 33 through 42. And though the living power be angry with us a little while for our chastening and correction, yet shall he be at one again with his servants. But thou, O godless man, and of all other most wicked, be not lifted up without cause, without a cause, nor puffed up with uncertain hopes, lifting up thy hand against the servants of Ahia. For thou hast not yet escaped the judgment of the Almighty Power, who seeth all things. For our brethren, who now have suffered a short pain, are dead under Ahiah's covenant of everlasting life. But thou, through the judgment of Ahiah, shalt receive just punishment for thy pride. But I, as my brethren, offer up my body and life for the laws of our fathers, beseeching Ahiah that he would speedily be merciful unto our nation, and that thou by torments and plagues mayest confess that he alone is power, that he alone is God. Do y'all see that? Let's keep reading. And that in me and my brethren the wrath of the Almighty, which is justly brought upon all our nation, may cease. Then the king, being in a rage, handled him worse than all the rest, and took it grievously that he was mocked. So this man died undefiled, and put his whole trust in the Most High. Oh, that's powerful. Let's keep reading. Last of all, after all the sons, the mother died. Let this be enough now to have spoken concerning the idolatrous feasts and the extreme tortures. Did y'all read verse 42? Let this be enough now to have spoken concerning the idolatrous feast and the extreme tortures? Let this be enough now to have spoken concerning the idolatrous feasts and the extreme tortures? So you want to know what the Most High thinks about your Thanksgiving? About an idolatrous feast? Let this be enough now to have spoken concerning the idolatrous feast and the extreme tortures? I would rather die than to put that filth into my mouth. And this needs to be the mindset, ladies and gentlemen. This needs to be how you think about it. Let's go back to 2 Maccabees chapter 6 and read verse 7 again. That's 2 Maccabees chapter 6, verse 7. And in the day of the king's birth every month, they were brought by bitter constraint to eat of the sacrifices. And when the feast of Bacchus was kept, the Jews were compelled to go in procession to Bacchus carrying ivy. So our people were forced, upon pain of death, to eat this filth. But so many people will hear and will actually understand what the scriptures have to say about this topic. And they will go sit right down and feed their flesh, and then have the nerve to try and bless the food, when the Most High says he despises those feast days. As a matter of fact, let's get that. Let's go to Amos chapter 5, verses 21 through 27. That's Amos chapter 5, verses 21 through 27. I hate, I despise your feast days, and I will not smell in your solemn assemblies. Though ye offer me burnt offerings and your meat offerings, I will not accept them, neither will I regard the peace offerings of your fat beast. Take thou away from me the noise of thy songs. Most High, I don't even want to hear you sing. Take thou away from me the noise of thy songs, for I will not hear the melody of thy viols. But let judgment run down as waters, and righteousness a mighty stream. Have ye offered unto me sacrifices and offerings in the wilderness 40 years, O house of Israel? But ye have borne the tabernacle of your Moloch, and Chiun your images, the star of your God, which ye made to yourselves. Therefore will I cause you to go into captivity beyond Damascus, saith the Most High, whose name is the power of hosts. Wow. Elder Ayel just did a live the other night talking about the power of the name. And then Amos 5:27 just told you that the Most High's name is the power of hosts. Let me translate that for you. The power that the angels have, that power, they have that power through his name. All right, guys. So now that you have an understanding of the gravity of these idolatrous feast days, now let's talk a little bit more about Thanksgiving. Of course, after this, you'll probably call it Thankskilling. To sum it up in a nutshell, this is what Thanksgiving is. Thanksgiving is the celebration of the blood sacrifice to the pagan god Pan. Like I said, I'm putting together information specifically for a future lesson where I'm going to deal with all of these wicked holidays. I've been working on it for a while now, so I'm not going to go very deep into Pan, but that's what's going on here. These Romans have committed genocide, and all the death on the battlefield is a sacrifice to that wicked false idol. Now, those of you who think that what happened to the American natives, what happened to our people, was not so bad and it was just the soldiers who died, let me inform you that you are gravely mistaken. I've put together some information for you from various scholarly sources. I'm not going to name every book, every report, every website where I gathered this information from because it would just be too much. I'm just going to present the information, and if you like, you can look it up on the internet and you can find the information. It's not hard to find. First thing I want to talk about is the Bloody Third. The Bloody Third was a nickname that was given to the 3rd Colorado Cavalry. Let me read it. The 3rd Colorado Cavalry was formed in the mid-1860s when increased traffic on the United States immigrant trails and settler encroachment resulted in numerous attacks against them by the Cheyenne and Arapaho. The Hungate Massacre and the display in Denver of mutilated victims raised political pressure for the government to protect its people. Governor John Evans sought and gained authorization from the War Department in Washington to found the 3rd. More a militia than a military unit, the Bloodless 3rd was composed of 100 Daysers, that is, volunteers who signed on for 100 days to fight against the Indians. Its nickname came from its lack of battle experience. The unit's only commander was Colonel George L. Shoup, a politician from Colorado. The regiment was assigned to the District of Colorado, commanded by Colonel John M. Shivington. So y'all, this Bloody Third, the 3rd Colorado Cavalry, they were 100 Daysers. They signed up to fight for 100 days. These were not even soldiers. That's why their name started out as the Bloodless 3rd. But by the end of what they did, they were known as the Bloody 3rd. So let's read some more. The words of Ben Clark, Custer's chief of scouts, brought out the truth after Custer distributed the propaganda about one white woman and 2 white boys. Here's what really happened using deductive reasoning. Occam's razor, and remembering that this Cheyenne woman had likely survived the Sand Creek Massacre 4 years earlier or knew it very well. She didn't want her son mutilated by Custer or a 7th Cavalry soldier, since she didn't want her vagina ripped out with a weapon and put on a stick, or worn, or have her reproductive organs made into a tobacco pouch. She killed her son and herself first. Stop. I told you all this lesson was not for children. Get the children out the room, because there's more of this. U.S. soldiers inevitably chased the defenseless Cheyenne and Arapaho by horse and foot with knives and guns in hand. Their victims had to be positioned before ripping off their scalps, cutting off their ears, smashing out their brains, butchering their children, tearing their breastfeeding infants away from their mother's breasts, and then murdering those infants. The Bloody Third soldiers necessarily had to kill the infants before cutting out their mother's genitals. What kind of wicked people would cut out the mother's genitals? It's enough to make me cuss. And these wicked soldiers, not even soldiers, these wicked men weren't even led by a real general. They were led by a politician. And America knows, because check this out. The fact the Sand Creek was a deliberate massacre is not contested, especially since the Bloody Third set the village in flames and took all the evidence back to Washington to hide it. Andrew Jackson supervised the mutilation of 800 or so Creek Indian corpses, the bodies of men, women, and children that he and his men massacred, cutting off their noses to count and preserve a record of the dead, slicing long strips of flesh from their bodies to tan and turn into bridal reins. Now this next account right here, I've actually read this to you guys before when I was doing my Columbus video. This was an account by LaSalle, one of Columbus's men. He says, "When I was in the boat, I captured a beautiful Carib woman. I conceived desire to take pleasure. I took a rope and thrashed her well, for which she raised such unheard screams that you would not have believed your ears. Finally, we came to an agreement in such a manner that I tell you that she seemed to have been brought up in a school of harlots. Here's another account. 2 of the best-looking squaws were lying in such a position, and from the appearance of the genital organs and of their wounds, there can be no doubt that they were first ravished and then shot dead. Nearly all of the dead were mutilated. Y'all, I hope these words are not glossing over you. I hope you're not being insensitive to these words. I hope you are listening and really understanding the gravity of what our people went through. One woman, big with child, rushed into the church, clasping the altar and crying for mercy for herself and unborn babe. She was followed and fell pierced with 12 lances. The child was torn alive from the yet palpitating body of his mother, first plunged into the holy water to be baptized, and immediately its brains were dashed out against the wall. It's an abomination to baptize a baby. But it wasn't enough to just baptize the baby first. Then they had to bash its brains against the wall. Here's another account from Las Casas. The Christians attacked them with buffets and beatings. Maybe that word is buffets, I'm not sure. Let me look it up real quick on the dictionary. Okay, dictionary.com says, buffet, a blow as with the hand or fist, a violent shock or concussion. Okay, so now we know what buffet means. So the Christians attacked them with buffets and beatings. Then they behaved with such temerity and shamelessness that the most powerful ruler of the island had to see his own wife raped by a Christian officer. And these devils got the nerve to call us savages. Here's another account from the Bloody Third. I heard one man say that he had cut a woman's private parts out and had them for exhibition on a stick. I heard another man say that he cut the fingers off an Indian to get the rings off his hand. I also heard of numerous instances in which the men had cut out the private parts of females and stretched them over the saddle bows and some of them over their hats. What kind of wicked, sadistic spirit do you have to stretch a vagina over a hat and wear it? What kind of wicked pride is that? Our people suffered greatly. American Horse said of the massacre at Wounded Knee, the fact of killing of the women, and more especially the killing of the young boys and girls who are to go to make up the future strength of the Indian people, is the saddest part of the whole affair, and we feel it very sorely. You guys, separate yourselves. Be holy. This day should not be a day of celebration. These people are celebrating death. Go to Proverbs chapter 8 and let's read verse 36. That's Proverbs chapter 8 and let's read verse 36. But he that sinneth against me wrongeth his own soul. All they that hate me love death. All they that hate me love death. These people celebrate death because they love death. They hate the Most High. I didn't say that. The scripture said that. I know that many of our people are being deceived and don't understand what is happening with them. They think that they are meeting because they love their families and it's a time of Thanksgiving and blah, 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 blah. When you guys are going and speaking with your families, don't be so heavy-handed with the law. Be all things to all men. Be wise as a serpent and gentle as a dove. Meet them where they are. All praises to Ahaya Bahashem Yeshaya, Warawak Kadash. Shalawam.